Welcome, everyone. We are delighted to have you join us tonight for our first event celebrating the art of storytelling.
Yes.
We are honored to have B.Earl,
Hello.
an accomplished writer for Marvel Comics.
Nice to see everyone. Thank you for coming out.
For his work, he has added contributions to the rich legacy of Marvel by adding depth, imagination, and humanity to characters loved by readers around the world.
Well, that sounds nice. I sound really cool. Thank you.
You are good. So tonight we'll find out more about his creative process, the craft of writing into the unique universe of Marvel, and also get insight on what it means to write stories that inspire generations. We will also dive into the newly published book, which is Ultimate Hawkeye, launched on September 24th.
Yeah.
So thank you, Ben, for being with us here tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be nerds with you all who like Marvel and comics, or to learn about comics. I think, comics is unfortunately a very underappreciated art form, and I think a lot of people don't, everyone thinks it's funny books for kids a lot, or they think of it as movies, inspiration. Hollywood always looks at comics as like, oh, that's a great IP. And I'm like, no, we should love the comics for what they are. So,
Exactly.
I think it's important. So I'm out here promoting our industry of comic book writing, also someone who's worked in film for many years, but I have truly found my love for comics as a writer and creator. So I'm grateful to be here, and I can't wait to hear your questions and everyone else's
All right.
questions.
Thank you everybody.
Yeah. And Ultimate Hawkeye, which is up there for purchase.
Exactly. All right, Ben.
Yeah.
Who is Ben?
Who's Ben? That's a great question. I'm an 11-year-old kid who wanted to make comic books. And I kind of lost that for a long time because I got caught up in filmmaking. As much as I love movies, and I love movies, don't get me wrong, but I forgot that I loved comics. And I think that was something, that I lost on my journey as I kind of was going out into the world. And I think really storytelling, as you were saying earlier, I think that's something that we often sort of forget how powerful and important it is. And, our story and narrative of our own life and our journey. So I'm just someone who loves stories, and I like to tell them. So make them up.
Great.
Nice. So tell us, what inspired you to start writing comics?
Well, it was an accident. I mean, when I was 11, I wanted to make comics, and then my dad, who is an artist, would always be like, I wanted to draw them. And he would be like, those muscles don't make any sense. And I'd be like, no, you got to look at this art. And it was like this artist, Rob Liefeld, for anyone that this guy knows, Pouch Man. Anyway, I just wanted to draw big superheroes and cool things that smashed and blew up and action adventure. And I think I started on my journey in that way, and ultimately, it found me to filmmaking, but comics were sort of a roundabout. I accidentally fell into writing them. I met Will.I.Am from the Black Eyed Peas at his studio. A friend of mine knew Will and was working with him on a movie, and was like, you should come over to the studio. And I was working over at my office, and I said, all right, I'll come by, and I don't know what I'm going to say to Will, but cool, whatever. And at the time, I had been running this very big networking event for people in comics and film and animation, gaming, movies, everything. And I met Will, and he was like, we were just talking, and I was telling him about what I was doing, and then he was shooting this movie in his studio with the guy I knew, and then I left and I went back to my office, and at the time I was working at this company called Millennium Films. We did things like Rambo and Angel Has Fallen, all these big action movies, and I get a call from the guy, and he goes, Will wants to work with you. And I was like, what? What does that even mean? Okay. And he's like, yeah, he's got this story he wants to turn into a graphic novel. And that's how I ended up writing comic books. So I took Will's script and turned it into a graphic novel, got money from him to go hire a team, and I made a comic book. And I then turned it over to Will, and I didn't hear anything for like 6 or 7 months. And I said, all right, well, I guess it's a coffee table book somewhere on his hard drive, maybe, I don't know. And we just kind of forgot about it. It was just really kind of one of those moments where you're kind of disappointed. You like put all this energy and time and work and love and care into making this thing, and you're like super proud of it, and you're like, well, I don't know where it's gonna go, but maybe it'll go somewhere cool. And then nothing. And then this is Hollywood for you, right? You like, you get these really high highs and then all of a sudden you just like crash and burn, and you're just like, where's this going? But I got a FaceTime, and again, I was at my office at Millennium, and it's Will, and he's like, yo, B, we got a publisher. And I was like, okay, who? And he goes, I'm not gonna tell you. And I was like, get out of here, man, come on, tell me. He's like, all right, it's Marvel. And I was like, come on. He's like, yeah. All right, I gotta go, bye. And that was my conversation, and that's how I got into making comic books. And from that, it was like this crazy whirlwind where we ended up at all the cons. I mean, I'm like getting shuffled around with all the Black Eyed Peas through all these, back alleys of San Diego Comic-Con, all the secret tunnels and passages, to sign comics and be on the Marvel panels and blah, blah, blah. One of those, I love telling the story because everyone knows Stan Lee. And as we're running late to get to our panel, and we're going to this Marvel panel to do the talk. So it's me and Will and Tab and Apple and all the handlers and everyone and whatever. So as we're like running late and trying to get shuffled off because we're almost, going to miss our panel, who should roll up but Stan Lee on his little cart? And he's got his handlers and whatever. And he's like, oh, hello, what are you guys doing here? And we're like, we made a comic book. And he goes, oh, really? What comic? And of course, the handlers have all like the big stack of our book, Masters of the Sun. And we're like, we made this Masters of the Sun book. And he goes, really? Can you sign it for me? So I'm like, oh, man, I just got to sign my book for Stan Lee. So there's a picture if you go on the, hello, there's seats over there. If you go on the interwebs and look up Stan Lee and Black Eyed Peas, and you can type in my name. There's a cool little picture. And at the time, I had this crazy long hair and my hat's on backwards. Super style. I thought I was so cool.
What lucky accident.
It was a very lucky accident.
Yeah.
Being late actually got us to something even cooler. So
yeah, sometimes accidents.
You never
can
know
be good.
what could happen. But that was how I ended up falling into writing comic books.
All right.
So,
what does your writing process look like?
That's a good one. It's constant. You're just constantly listening and writing and noodling in notebooks. But it often happens like kind of in a flash, like when for instance, this Hawkeye book, right? Like a lot of times with Marvel, I always call us like special ops with these projects. We kind of get just dropped in. And this book, I got an email from our editors on it, and they were like, hey, we need a book. Would you like to write Ultimate Hawkeye? We need it in like 2 weeks. Like we need a full script. And I was like, okay.
2 weeks.
Yes, of course. You never say no, So it was a weekend of like reading everything of the Ultimates, all the Ultimate line, all the new scripts that had been, been written. And I had this like flash of like seeing Eyes Wide Shut meeting Most Dangerous Game, and that was the flash. And I was like, okay, what's that story? And I think when you're writing comics, depending on what the format is, depending on how many pages you have, we knew going into this one it was a 20-pager, so it's a one shot. So you have to know like how can you pace something for 20 pages. So every story is different when it comes to how much your pacing is. If you're writing like a novel or something that's your own thing, that's on you. You can do it how you best do it. But when it comes to writing for a publisher when it's a job and you love it too, but at the same time you're doing a job. So you have to execute and deliver for an audience, and you have to do it in a certain amount of time. So your process is really do the best you can with what you have and hope for the best.
Depends on the deadline too.
Yeah, so you got these crazy deadlines, you just go, all right, we're gonna do it. And that's it. So the process is different all the time. You know, often when it's the process for like personal writing and things like that, you know, that's a bit different. But when you're writing to deadlines,
you should run.
just make it happen. Just come up with it, and you know, and go. All right. Here's the thing: if you're excited about it, and when you can pitch it to someone else, and keep pitching it, and keep getting more excited by every time you tell people that idea, that story, that's part of the process, because that's going to be your audience. You know.
Got it.
So, hope that helps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it certainly does for anybody starting or thinking to start.
Yes.
Moving on to our next question. Do you collaborate closely with the artists, or do you give them freedom to interpret your script?
It all depends on the artist. Some artists like to go like word perfect on a script, you know, where they're like, they just like working with Phil Noto on that Daredevil and Echo book. Phil was very like, what I wrote was what he drew. So it's funny. So this book back here, wherever it is, Werewolf by Night, the very first book that I got to
Right there.
up there it is. That's one of the issues. So that was the very first real like Marvel project. Because when we did the Masters of the Sun, that technically wasn't a Marvel IP. Will owns the IP for that. So it was published by Marvel, but it wasn't a Marvel book. These were not Marvel characters. We made, like, these were characters that were made up. But Werewolf by Night was the very first like actual Marvel book. And I was not confident in my writing for a comic. So, because I didn't know how I was going to pace it. That was really kind of scary, because you're like, all right, how do I? So I literally drew every panel, and I wrote it like 5 times, because I like wrote the ideas out, and then I wrote it page by page, and I said, this is what it needs to happen on each page. Then I went panel by panel and said, this needs what happened on each panel. And then I would draw each panel, and I would turn them in with my script, just being like, I hope you understand it. So the artist, Scott Eaton, was like super stoked on my panels. He's like, yeah, like they're terrible. You can, so if you buy the trade, they're in the back of the trade. All of issue 2, you can see my entire like thumbnailing process.
Do you keep those things?
Oh yeah,
still?
I have a whole notebooks of all. I stopped doing it after I did Kashala. Like I didn't really do it for the Spider-Man book. I kind of just like, now I kind of have a knowing of like what my pacing is and how I like to. But it was interesting because like that one, so Scott was like, I loved what you did, and I pretty much kept it almost exactly what you did. And he then asked our editor, he was like, you should put these in the book. And then our editor reached out and was like, can we publish them in the trade? So I was like, yeah, of course. So I actually got to be a Marvel artist, I guess. At the end of the day, I got that dream
That
achieved,
was good.
But yeah, but the Spider-Man book, working with Juan Ferreira, incredible artist, and just like such a great guy. Juan, I remember like the very first script I turned in, and then I got it back from our editor saying, hey, can you just like check for lettering, right? Your final process is lettering. So can you go through and just make sure all the panels and lettering match up? And I was being lazy, and I was like, yeah. I was like involved with some other project, because I always am juggling multiple projects. And I was like, yeah, they look great. I didn't read like, because they sent me all the PDF with all the images from issue 1, and then I had my script, and I was like, yeah, it looks great, it's fine. What I didn't realize was that Juan was changing things constantly. So, because that's how Juan draws, like he just gets inspired, like he's super like jazz. So I learned that by book 2. Right. So like they came back and the letter was like, yeah, I don't know where these words should fit, because there's 4 panels written and he only drew 3. And I was like, oh, that's how Juan works. So you kind of figure it out. And then, you know, once I figured that out, I was like, oh, all right, cool. Then Juan and I were just constantly on WhatsApp talking out ideas, and super, super collaborative. And that was a lot of fun. So every artist is different. Some artists just like to just take the script and just go off and do it. Other artists are like, what are you thinking here? How are you vibing? Yeah. So.
And how long does it usually take to finish the script?
It all depends. I mean, you know, for me, it's like my process is figuring out what each issue needs to have happen, then that figures out the arc. And then once the arc is done, going into each script and then breaking it down into like what happens each page, because obviously you have to know your pacing, so you need to have pops too. So in comics, you really want to have a lot of things like 2-page spreads, like 1-page splashes, you know, because those are action moments. It's like in a movie when you have like a big explosion or, you know, some sort of tentpole moment, as it's called. So you want to like translate that into the comic, so when you're turning the page, you're like, whoa, that's really cool. Like for instance, in this Ultimate Hawkeye, it didn't have many pages, it's 20 pages, right? But I was like, there's a reveal of a major character. So, okay, so that needs to have a full page, that's the Ronin character. And then I had this like really dark moment that really needed to be impactful. So like, I knew that those are the paces like that I need to have. So like, once that was done, then I went into the panel break. So I would say like, every book is different. Obviously it depends on your deadline, but I mean, to actually write a script, I mean, I can knock a script out in a week. Like once I know, yeah. I mean, once I know what's that?
Depend on
it
deadline.
depends on the deadline. But I think the thing is it's really about how much development and sort of pre-work that you've done. So when you're talking about like script, when you're talking about like dialogue and all that, once I've got the pacing down, you know, I'm already seeing it happen. So like for me, it's like I'm almost writing it 3 times. So. It all depends on the deadline, though. It's like a lot of times they're like, we need it by Friday, and it's Wednesday.
You
and
need
you have
somebody
it,
to push you.
I mean, I love it. I love deadlines. Exactly. So, yeah.
Yes. So what was the first comic you ever read that made you fall in love with the medium?
Archie and Dick Tracy. I loved Archie. We got this. It was like one of these Archie digests that we got from the library. And I was like a kid who grew up without a TV, so we were at the library all the time. And there was this like Archie book that I always was reading, and then they finally like put it in the bin to sell it. And I was like, we gotta buy that. So we bought it, and it was like falling apart already. So it was my favorite book. So I was hooked on Archie. Those were my favorite comics. And then I got into like Dick Tracy. And it wasn't until I was probably like, I was probably like 7 or 8 at this time. It was X-Men #1. That was the one that like got me hooked. It was the Jim Lee covers where I was just like, this is awesome. And there was like 7 of them you had to collect. And I think I got the Magneto one. So like all the covers lined up and they made this huge picture. And now that's the only comic I have that's graded. And it's like a 9.8 and it's worth like $100, but whatever, I never cared about. My friend just gave it to me because I was like, he had like 10 of them and he was like selling, he owns a comic shop. And he was like, yeah, I'm selling these. I was like, that was my first comic I ever bought my own self at the comic book shop. And he's like, have it. And I was like, really? So that's the only comic I have that's graded because that actually means something to me.
Which one was the most fun character?
To write?
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed writing Spider-Man. I think that's like, look, as a kid, that's the one you grow up reading. Like Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, you know, was always my favorite. I loved the Sinister Six stories. I had a blast writing Peter Parker because, you know, my best friend from growing up, he's the biggest Spider-Man fan. I mean, he's got like all Spider-Man tattoos covering and all of everywhere he's got Spider-Man. And when I told him that I was writing a Spider-Man book, he like lost it. He was just like, "Oh my gosh, that's so cool!" And then when it came out, when issue 1 came out, he called me up. He's like, "I'm reading Peter Parker, and I totally hear your voice." And that was me, like I did it, like you know, like because we all put ourselves into our characters. Yeah. So it was like I got to be Peter Parker. Like that's pretty rad. But honestly, writing this book, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun being this character. And that book that's coming out in November, this Echo book, you know, it was hard to write Echo in the Daredevil and Echo book that you have because it was a 2-hander that all of a sudden Ghost Rider came into. And now I'm like trying to juggle between Ghost Rider and, you know, Daredevil and Echo. And you're like, but I didn't really pay attention as much as I would have liked to with Echo in that book. But getting the opportunity to just like write only her, I really love this book and I think people will really enjoy it. So that one comes out November 5th, but she's pretty rad and that was a lot of fun to write her. So anyway, cool. I think every character gives you a different feeling when you write them. So it's kind of hard to say which was the best. Like I said, Peter Parker. I mean,
all right, Peter Parker.
You get to be Peter Parker. That's fun.
Okay, we found out your most fun character to write for, but who you relate to more, like in personal level?
Which character do I relate to? That's a tough one. I mean, when you're kind of going into all these different stories, you're understanding, what are they going up against? And I mean, honestly, like this one, I think, this Charlie Ramsey character, I think has really been one of the more interesting ones to write because this story in of itself was like almost an initiation of this character into, this next phase in their life and story. So that one I really related to because I feel like I'm on this journey right now that is shifting and changing. So in a way, it's like a new phase and a new initiation into a new journey. So I think right now I'll say that this character, Charlie Ramsey in the Ultimate Hawkeye book, was probably the one I most relate to.
All right.
That's cool. All right.
Do you base your characters on the real people, like
Oh yeah,
local people?
yeah. My girlfriend's in the new
All right.
in the new Echo book, and it's funny. It's kind of accidental. I did not send the artist any images, any pictures, but somehow I just described this, and she's got a lot of tattoos. She's got dark hair, and literally. But I put, here's the fun thing. So this is a fun little one. I put my son in Daredevil and Echo. And my son, Liam, I named him Leor. And he's Russian. And so, on his side, his grandmother was Russian. And my dad's side, from Ukraine. So his character is this, all into heavy metal, seeing slaughter to prevail. And then he does a deal with the Demogoblin and becomes one of the 4 children of the apocalypse. That was fun. So my son gets to say, I was in the 4 children of the apocalypse.
You should find somebody from Yorktown.
Yeah, I think Barat wants to be in a book.
Right, so when it comes to writing now, do you prefer writing for like heroes, villains, or side characters? What is more fun or easier?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about Marvel books, I think every character you're getting is a toy in the toy box that already exists, right? So in a lot of ways, you're taking these toys out and kind of playing with them, and then you got to put them back after you're done. So other writers are getting these characters, and if you've created a new character, you kind of got to let it go. Like Werewolf by Night that we got to create, so Taboo and I, so obviously, I mean, I know I haven't really been talking a lot about, my creative relationship with Taboo and how this came about. But, a lot of our stuff has been very Native American and Mesoamerican driven. And, in creating that Werewolf by Night character, that was very, instilled. Like there's a lot of personal side to that, especially channeling it through Tab's, ancestry. And after doing 4 issues, that character goes in the toy box of Marvel. You don't own it, right? It's Marvel's. They can do whatever the hell they want with it.
All right.
So, you could be like, oh, I really would like to write some more of that character. And they're like, yeah, well, we're putting this writer on it. So Jason Lowe has been writing Werewolf by Night. And, that's one of those things where it's like, okay, this character now is out of my hands. So, you read it and you're like, oh man, I wish we had done things a little different.
See, it's good to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, with all due respect, I mean, Jason's done a great job with it. And, I mean, you just kind of have to let go. It's one of the hardest things, right? You give birth to these children and
you don't own it.
They have to go out into the world.
Exactly.
they must leave the nest.
Who's your biggest influence in storytelling?
In storytelling, Alan Moore is my biggest influence as a comic book writer and writer. I think he's one of my favorites. Alan Moore wrote Watchmen, From Hell, V for Vendetta. I mean, the list goes on. He's fantastic. Promethea, I always say that's the book I wish I had written, but he got to it first. Yeah, he's absolutely, when it comes to writing, is my, kind of that North Star or whatever you want to say. When it comes to like filmmaking and storytelling, I would say like Robert Rodriguez was probably the influence that I got most sort of driven by. I don't know, El Mariachi and Desperado, and now he's doing all the Spy Kids movies. Those were not like, it was his earlier stuff where he was very just like, I'm going to go off and just make stuff. So I think that attitude and that sort of, kind of auteur, independent, I'm just going to go do stuff and make it, and I'm just going to, create. I love that. And I think that's where Robert Rodriguez as a filmmaker, and Stanley Kubrick. I mean, if I have to say like a filmmaker that I'd be like, that's someone who is fantastic. I mean, there's so many. It's hard to say. Akira Kurosawa.
It's hard to find one.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're talking about writers and people that, Kurt Vonnegut, he's another one. When I read his stuff, I'm like, I wish I had written like him. But anyway,
It's good to have one.
it is. You have to read to be inspired to then go off and write. So.
I'm very excited about this next question because I'm very curious about this. Have your characters ever surprised you and taken the story in a different direction than you planned?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, in writing Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man, I really didn't have, I kind of was just listening to the character, and there was this rock that I pulled from like this myth, but I wasn't really going to use it as anything. And it was just like my MacGuffin, this sort of device that was going to pull us in and out of the story. And I was kind of like not really paying attention to it. But then I got stuck as I was going into issue 2. And I hadn't finished issue 1 yet, but I was like, and I just remember thinking about Peter Parker with this rock and what it meant to him. And I remember as a kid, my dad had found this like piece of flint. I don't know where he found it. And he would always tell me this story like Native Americans had chipped it, and it could have been even older. It could be 10,000 years old, and you don't know whose hand held this thing. And I don't know, it just always stuck with me. And it was always sitting on the shelf in the attic. And all of a sudden it was like Peter Parker was like holding that rock and going like, what is this from? And he was like questioning that. And then I was like, okay, that rock, that's an important part of the story. And, one of the myths that I hadn't even really fully pulled out was this myth of a rock and a coyote and Iktomi, the spider. And all of a sudden the rock became the most important part of the story because Peter was like, you need to use this rock. And ultimately the rock was stuck on him, and then he has to kill him. So anyway, I'm spoiling the story. If you haven't read it, go read Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man. But that was how Dream Spider became Dream Spider. It was because of the rock. It attached itself to her. And that was like all the pain and all of the power of storytelling was in that rock. So Peter surprised me. There you go.
Okay, how does comics industry change since you started?
Well,
With
I've only
AI and those things.
Yeah, I mean, one, everyone hates AI, and I also have been in that space as well. But I understand why it's such a hated tool, because in a lot of ways people look at it as like you push a button and it takes away the soul of the creative process. And I don't disagree with that, but I also have worked on projects where we have utilized, AI to train models, to expedite the process and be able to turn around a project in a specific way. But I'm always bringing human artists and creatives into the project. We did a project for HP, for Hewlett Packard, for this Omen gaming system. I worked with a company to develop an anime manga book that was put out by them. So that was an interesting project. But I think the process of storytelling is, if you don't have a great story that you care about, then no one else will care about it. So that's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter what technology we have. It might speed things up. It might make costs more effective. But at the end of the day, if you're not telling something you care about, then your audience won't care either.
You can use in a good way.
I mean, yeah, it's just, it depends on how, like, look, I will have to say technology was how I got into the business, because when I was 19, I was able to buy an editing system. Normally that would have cost $150,000 to get an Avid system. I got a Final Cut Pro system that allowed me to start cutting movies, and I became a film editor. And, if I hadn't had that ability to use that technology and have that cost effectiveness back in the, late 90s, early 2000s, it would have been a very different career. So, it was, I hate the word democratize because I don't think that's the right word, but I think what it does is levels a playing field to certain degrees on how you as an artist, you as a creative, YouTube now has completely changed the distribution model.
Exactly.
Hollywood has completely shifted. It's in a turmoil. And, it's a big reason why I've, pivoted out of certain degrees of my own businesses, but also to look to create new business and new opportunities. I mean, comics for me is just, I love it. It's fun, but it's not, it's not always, it doesn't make a lot of money either. Challenge. But now I'll say this, what is happening with technology, if you approach it in a way of creating assets like, for instance, the artwork, from that artwork, we can be able to pull out models. Those models, they can be then reskinned or built into like Blender or Unreal Engine. Now all of a sudden we have 3D models that we can start putting into animation. So you can take from a comic book
You can make a movie.
and start pulling out all these assets and start building a repository that you can ultimately turn into short films, so there are ways to do it that ultimately are going to shift the paradigm for creatives. And I think that's going to be really powerful.
Great.
You kind of answered this, but in a few words, what do you think makes a comic stand out in today's market?
I mean, that's a tough one because obviously if you're doing, Marvel books, it's always going to be the marquee characters. People are like, oh, I love, Wolverine, and you're going to go and buy a Wolverine book hoping that, it's going to be a good story. I think the thing is that, artists always help visually pop comics. So, working with artists that really get the idea, or the storytelling, or the whatever it might be, and help translate that into something visually impactful. I mean, that's the thing that's going to stand out. I mean, you can have the greatest cover. Like, look, this is a super cool cover, isn't it? It's like foil. This is like 90s right here.
This one's a special one.
This is a special one. One of you that signed up will win this tonight. But it's one of those things. I mean, anything in marketing, it's going to be shiny things people get excited about. But what is the thing that's going to carry the best? It's going to be word of mouth. I mean, if I'm getting terrible reviews and getting slammed across the board, I mean, maybe I really wrote a bad comic, or maybe they don't like me. But if you have mixed reviews and there's like a big demarcation of something being like people love and then other people hate, well, then you did something right, because at least you've created a dialogue. There's a reason why people love stuff. So I don't know. It's hard to tell what your audience is going to like. So I mean, you can write as best to your audience as you can, because that's a key to writing comics. But if you don't think it's cool, then nobody's going to think it's cool, in my opinion.
Exactly. What's the biggest challenge you're facing on the comics industry? Like, do you have?
I mean, right now it's Diamond. I don't know if any of you pay attention to the business of comics, but Diamond Distribution has been in bankruptcy, and Marvel shifted over to Penguin Random House. So Diamond Distribution, which was out of New Jersey and basically had a corner on the market, they've gone bankrupt. So all of these mom and pop shops that have been buying comics from Diamond, and they have to purchase comics 3 months in advance, right? So now they're screwed because they bought those comics 3 months in advance, and now they can't get their merchandise. So they don't have any stock to be able to start stocking their shelves. So what are they going to do? And they've already put out X amount of dollars, so they can't pivot and start throwing that money to Penguin, or whoever. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges right now in comics as a business, because think about it, like comics is a specialty shop, right? Like comic book shops are specialty shops. Like you can buy trades, right? But when it comes to these floppies, these are being sold in shops across the country, around the world. But, distribution is relatively, smaller than, because you've got how many Barnes and Nobles around the world, right? But how many comic book shops are around the world, and how small are they? And they have to cater to a specific clientele. So if you're not going to your comic book shop and saying, I want to read Hawkeye, or I want to read this book, or I want to read that book, they're not going to order it, because otherwise they're sitting on stock that's not selling. So, that's one of the challenges. And when you're working with a distributor like Diamond, that unfortunately right now is, it's going out of business, and it's tough. Like Dynamite Comics, who's one of the big ones, like Nick Barucci here in Jersey, I think they lost over $1 million because they lost all their stock because of Diamond. So anyway, those are the challenges. It's a tough business. I mean, it's a tough business, but you know, you do it because you love it, and you hope that, you know.
Yeah, right now with like Amazon and all those online books, and it's kind of tough.
Yeah, I mean, look, Amazon's not selling floppies, right? Like this business is built off of variant covers, right? It's a collector business. I mean, most people buy issues 1 and 2. If it's a 5-issue run, they might buy issue 5, right? So Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man, we were like top 10, we were number 1 on the cover price. Cover price is like this website that basically tells you, like, these are the covers that people are buying right now, right? Our Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 5 was on there for like 5 weeks at number 1 because we introduced a brand new character. So everyone was speculating, oh my gosh, like this brand new character, Dream Spider, in the 616. 616 is the main universe of Marvel, right? So like everyone's speculating on that. Like, are they going to do something more with Dream Spider? And then we got a short story in an Edge of the Spider-Verse. So got to write another little Dream Spider story. Now she's sort of languishing, but she's a pretty cool character. And you never know. I mean, because people speculate, and if it becomes a movie or if it becomes a TV series or whatever it is, then all of a sudden the collector market, because there's only so many of these that get sold, right? Yeah. So that market now pops that book up. And then if you get it graded with CGC, you go out, you can sell them for, look, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen prices. Like some books go for $10,000 to $1 million to $10 million, you know? I mean, Superman, I mean, you don't know. So, I mean, there's a huge collector market around it, and a lot of it covers, is on the cover side. It's like, you know, different covers, variants. Yeah. So anyway, that's part of the business side of it.
Moving out of the business.
Yeah.
What's one comic you think everyone should read at least once?
Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And the reason why I say that, because it is a comic, or Will Eisner sequential art, but that's not a comic. Understanding Comics is a book that is all done as a comic. Scott McCloud drew, you know, and it basically talks to you and teaches you about the art of comics and the storytelling of comics. And I think for anyone involved in the visual arts or anyone involved with storytelling or narrative, I think it's a fantastic comic that everyone should read because it gives you an appreciation for the art form, the art of sequential storytelling, and it's really well done. And then if I had to say otherwise, I would also say Watchmen because, you know, that's a classic and it's Alan Moore. So.
That's great. Also, we have one last question. What advice would you give to aspiring comic book writers?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things is start going to conventions. I think that's really important because the comic book community is small and it's really very welcoming to some degrees. And you can meet a lot of really great people in the business of it, in the comics of it, in the spaces of it. And when you start going to conventions, you can go to Artist Alley and you can meet all of these writers, all of these artists, all these incredible people. I mean, you know, it was funny, last year we went to New York Comic Con, and I don't know if you know this writer, Brian Azzarello. He wrote this book, 100 Bullets, and it's one of my favorite books. And I've been a huge fan of Brian Azzarello, and there he's sitting. And I'm walking down my girlfriend and I are walking down the aisle, and I'm like, yo, it's Brian Azzarello. Oh, that's so cool. All right, I got to go talk to him. And I had a stash of my own comics in my backpack because Juan Ferreira, the artist on Spider-Man, he was there. So I was like, I got to get my book signed by Juan. So I got all these books signed by Juan, but I had a few extra ones. So I went up to Brian and started talking to Brian about, you know, comics and this and that. So I bought his book. He signed it for me, and I gave him a copy of ours. He's like, oh my God. So just like 2 weeks ago, Brian actually started following me on Instagram, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. You know, and like, so these people that you grew up reading, you know, and these heroes, start becoming your peers. You start connecting with them. People are so connected, so open. I mean, that was what I was saying earlier about throwing, it was called Comic Book Sunday. And I started in 2008 with a good friend of mine, Jim Kruger, who's written a lot of big comics. Earth X, Justice, Earth X, the Eternals movie was, a lot of those characters are based off of his Earth X series. So, Jim and I started this group, and it started very small. There was like 12 of us. And all of a sudden it grew to like 100 to 200. I had over 1,000 people in the group. But when we had a panel at San Diego Comic-Con, which is the biggest convention, in pretty much in the world still. I mean, New York is now catching up. But I had this amazing panel of all these incredible writers. The guy who created Blade, Marv Wolfman, was on it. Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, who also did Invader Zim. He with Jonan Vasquez, he was on the panel. And all these incredible folks on the panel. They were part of our community, right? And I remember walking to this panel, and I'm like, oh, I hope people come. I hope people make it to our panel. I'm like so nervous, right? And all of a sudden there's this line that I see, and I'm like, all right, there's our door. Okay. And I'm like about to walk to the door, and they're like, you need to go to the end of the line. And I was like, well, it's right here. Is it? Like, no, that's the start. The line wrapped around. We literally had standing room only in this panel, on our panel. And it was just one of those moments of going like, wow, like we really did something. And it was an incredible community of all these people that were always about, supporting each other. I still run into people. I was just at LA Comic-Con last week, and I ran into one of my friends, and he's like, if it wasn't for you, so many people's careers wouldn't have been started. And I'm not going like, oh, look at me. But it was like, because we built something. And Neo, I'm shouting out here, it's like, he got a career because he started going to this event, to this community. He met Marv Wolfman. He connected with I hooked him up with his very first comic book writing job at this company, Zenescope. So, I mean, those kinds of things. It's like, build the community. Get involved. Go to hang out at your local comic shop. Yes, write, obviously. Draw if you're an artist. But community is a key element to it. And I think, the networking side of it, it's really important, because otherwise, you're just right. I mean, look, you can put them on webtoons. Like, if you're an artist or writer who does, you can absolutely build a community. You can absolutely get your work out there. I think webtoons is a fantastic way, just because it's like free and it's vertical comics, and you can create them in Clip Studio Art, and you can just go off and start making comics right now. I mean, look, Laura Olympus, incredible book. The artwork is not Marvel artwork. It's a soap opera. But it works. The art works. The storytelling works. It hooks in, Luke, you love that book. I've never read it, but it's one of your favorite books. But it's like those things, like you can go off and start doing it. And just by doing it and being consistent, you'll build an audience. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, you might be a New York Times bestseller on,
You never know.
on the Barnes & Noble bookshelves. We're right here at Libri, so
Exactly.
you never know.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ben.
Absolutely.
For this beautiful conversation.
Oh, thank you for having
me. It will always hold a special place for us here at Libri.
Oh,
And thank you guys for showing up. Now we have the Ultimate Hawkeye for sale here at Libri, and Ben will be doing the signing afterwards. But if you have any questions for him right now, feel free.
Yes. Questions?
Ta-da.
Yes.
Are there any characters you dream of writing? I mean, you already wrote Spider-Man, but just kind of is there any other ones that you're like, oh, I really want to do that someday?
I mean, there we go. Yeah, I can hear you. Look, X-Men was always my favorite. And, it's funny. It's always, you never get what you want. You get what you need. I have a feeling I'll probably never write X-Men. I'll probably write every other character but, Cyclops and Wolverine. But who knows? Maybe. I mean, I always loved Cyclops, and I always loved Wolverine and the X-Men and Cable. Those were fun characters. But yeah, the X universe was always a favorite one of mine, and I think that's really, like I said, X-Men #1 was what got me into, buying superhero comics. Before that, I was reading Archie and Dick Tracy. So there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes.
Work with the artists. Is it all remote, or do you get to meet them in person?
It depends. I mean, Yeah, you know, to be honest, every project that I have done thus far has been remote. There was one project I was doing that was sort of an indie graphic novel with this video game company, and I hired this artist, and we were going to work. You know, he was literally a town over, and I was really excited because I thought, all right, cool, we can. But unfortunately, the project didn't. You know, it didn't work out with him, and I had to hire another artist. So who wasn't nearby. And so yeah, so every project I've worked with has been remote. And like I said, every artist is different. Like, you know, when we did the Kashala book, that was the Infinity comic, that artist was in Spain, and I actually never talked to that artist. Our editor spoke to that artist through a translator. So there was like, you know, that was probably the furthest connection to an artist versus like someone like Juan, who I would literally leave him voice notes on WhatsApp and, you know, send him Pinterest boards. So it all depends.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Luke.
If there was one duo you could write for, like two superheroes that you could write together, what would they be?
Ooh, like a team up? You know, the one that I've been noodling on is, you know, Captain America and Moon Knight. I think that would be a really cool team up. You know, you've got this like ancient Egyptian sort of connection, and you've got this like deep American sort of pride and you know, this character who's new. So you got this like new world ideology, and you got this ancient, you know, Egyptian mysticism. And I think that would be a really cool dynamic to see those two come together and what that bridge looks like. So that would be my choice. I like it.
Anybody
Yeah.
else? One more?
Yeah.
I thought of one thank you, because of that question, and because of something you said a bit earlier about how you feel like you like make up the stories. Do you feel like you're making them up, like it does feel like that toy box, and you just kind of build a whole new universe, or does it sometimes feel like you're tapping into like an otherworldly thing, and you're like seeing things that other people can't? Like, is it coming from you, or are you like?
No, I'm a recorder. I mean, I don't know. I remember, I mean, one of the most specific, I mean, they all have their different variations, but I remember seeing Los Angeles underwater. I was like taking the dog for a walk with my son, and I just saw everything underwater and like people just dead bodies floating. It was really morbid, very macabre scene.
Scary one.
Yeah, it was super scary because I was about to write this Kashala story, and I was trying to figure out what it was going to be. Right, so we had a pitch with the editor-in-chief, C.B. Belusky, and our editor on that book, and I'm going like, I don't know what I'm writing yet. And then all of a sudden I saw that, and the image that I saw, and this is how I opened my pitch to them, popping away. I was like, you know, we just see, like, it looks like an ocean, and you see these like white squares, these cubes like floating on the ocean. We don't know what it is, and this is for a vertical comic. So I was like, how can we make something really cool and impactful, right? So this is what I saw. And then you like start scrolling down, and as you scroll down, you see the Hollywood sign. So all of those those cubes were actually the Hollywood sign underwater, and there's like just bodies floating, and the cars are like all piled up on the freeway. The Capitol, you know, Records building was underwater. So that was what I opened my pitch with, and then I, you know, kind of went into it, and we ended up getting Dr. Doom as our villain for that one. That was a lot of fun. I was thinking I wanted to use Mojo, but I thought that was a fun. He was like, that's too off and odd.
Yeah.
But I thought Mojo would have been cool. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, those are the moments, and I think a lot of times, you know, you have that like flash, like last night, just talking with this artist, and I'm not gonna give too much away, but he wants to do a Doctor Strange story, and you know, all of a sudden, I just started thinking around like, what could that be? And I just saw Doctor Strange in like cool armor. Like old armor. And then all of a sudden that just started like spinning out all these things, and you're just like watching it play in your brain, and you're like, all right, what's happening with Doctor Strange? I don't know. And the story starts telling you what it is, so.
That's so magical.
It is. It's magic of storytelling. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you read us some pages?
Sure, I'll read the opening.
All right.
I know it's been a long night already, but I'll read quickly. So this is the opening to the ultimate Hawkeye story, and we open up with this character all cloaked in shadow, wearing a top hat and a sort of long trench coat, and it says the meatpacking district. Oh, Rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. William Blake. So I like to start with him. I was like, let's start off really, really heavy and heady, you know. Let's be pretentious and dramatic. So we start with a poem with William Blake. And he goes, my mom loved poetry, any sort of poetry. She'd pick up secondhand anthologies from the community college to add to her never-ending collection. But she read every one of them, memorized a good amount too, said it brought her peace during the chaos. We all pick up bits and pieces of our parents along the way. Some are good, some not so good. She also had a terrible temper, called it her righteous anger, got her into a lot of trouble, killed her in the end. I like to think that I didn't get that part of her, that all I got was the poetry, but I know I did. Whoosh. There you go. So,
Cool.
All right,
Ultimate
now,
Hawkeye. I think you can get them over there.
Sure.
now it's time for the lucky winner.
Yeah, let's
Raffle
pull
time.
a raffle. Do we have
Yes.
Is this the tickets to?
Probably they are not everybody here, so we have just a couple signing guys. So
Whoever's here gets
All
it.
right.
Gets
Yeah,
it.
whoever is here.
That's how we do it. So.
all right, let's do.
So we have all the names in here. So let's see. Oh, Julia Drenga.
Did you win? Oh my goodness! Congratulations!
And she was
You are
the
the lucky winner of the foil Hawkeye. So yay! I'll sign this up for. If it's for your sister, we'll sign it to her. Or if it's for you, whatever you like. So.
All right, we're gonna sign right there.
Yeah,
so
I'll sign them up.
let's do it.
Amazing. Thank you everyone
everybody.
so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so much, everyone.